So in this video we'll be showing you how to use a protractor to measure all types of angles. Now before measuring an angle, it is really important that you first have an idea as to its type of angle and also estimate its size. So just to go over some of the basics, so an acute angle is an angle that is between 0 and 90 degrees exclusive of those two numbers. Now the reason why it's exclusive of those two numbers, because 0 degrees would be just a straight line, would actually be no angle, and a 90-degree angle would therefore be a right angle. So an acute angle is any angle between the red dotted line and one of the lines of the angle. Now in terms of an obtuse angle, this is an angle that is between 90 and 180, and obviously exclusive of those two numbers, because obviously 90 degrees would be a right angle and 180 degrees would be a straight line. So an obtuse angle would basically be any angle between theirs and then the line where one of the lines is between that region there. So anywhere between those two between the two red lines would therefore mean it would be an obtuse angle. And again, you're looking for the answer would be between 90 and 180. Now for a reflex angle, this one's a little bit more difficult to kind of measure. But basically a reflex angle is an angle that is between 180 and 360. And again, with a reflex angle, there are two angles on show, and usually they would highlight that it is a reflex angle, so they would highlight as this. But obviously within a reflex angle there is also an acute angle, which would be this one here. So that would be the acute angle, and the green angle would be our reflex angle. So if you find that you've got a reflex angle, you're looking for an answer between 180 and 360 exclusive of those two numbers. So the next thing we move on to is knowing your protractor. Now there are several types of protractors you can get, and I'm not going to be on here trying to plug or sell you or send you a link to a manufacturer of a protractor, and I'm not going to influence you in that sense. But I would say the most common types of protractors that I've seen students in my class have are going to be one of these three protractors. So it's really, really important that when I'm going through the instructions of measuring an angle, that you understand where the key components of the protractors are, particularly with there being such a wide range. Now to start off with, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to number these protractors so you know which ones I'm talking about. Now when you're looking at your protractor, hopefully you've got one in front of you to establish which one type it is, and hopefully you can match up which of the three it's going to be. You're looking for three main components. Now the first one is the center of the protractor. So number one, the center of the protractor is here, so that's the center. With number two, my center protractor is actually on the edge. And on the third type, my center protractor is there. Now the center of the protractor is basically where 0 and 180 degrees, where I'd say where 90 and 0 meet at that particular point. And it's usually such an important part of a protractor that it is highlighted with a little circle of some sort. Now the next thing we need to be aware of is the baseline of the protractor. So what I'm going to do is to use good practice is to identify that with a line. And so your baseline is basically where the 0 and the 180, regardless of whether you're using the inside numbers or the outside numbers, actually meet. And that will be along the center of rotation, so the center of the protractor rather. So again, now on the second one, the actual center of the actual baseline of the protractor is actually on the edge, and whereas with the other two it's slightly elevated from the edge of the protractor. And again, I would probably advise getting one, particularly depends on what type of student you are, that if you have got one where the baseline is on the edge of the protractor, just be careful when you are using or looking after your protractor, because once that baseline becomes jagged, it then makes your protractor a little bit less usable. So always make sure that you are taking care. Try not to use your protractor as a slicing device to chop rubbers or to cut things with. But again, in terms of recognizing that, so there's my baseline on this protractor, my baseline on this one is the edge. And for the third one, my baseline is, again, the baseline is a line that connects the 180 to 0 and opposite ends of your protractor. Now the next one that we need to be aware of is the 0. Now on most protractors you will have two zeros. You've got a set of inside numbers and a set of outside numbers, and you may be asking yourself, why have I got one on either end? Well, it depends on where and how you're measuring your angle. So in some cases you might use the inside numbers, in some cases you might use the outside numbers, and that's where being aware of what type of angle it is going to be helps, because obviously if you're looking for an acute angle, then you know your answer should be the smaller out of the two numbers. If you're looking for an obtuse angle, you know then you're looking for an answer of an angle that is bigger out of the two numbers. So again, you just need to decide and use your common sense of thinking, right, well, I've got two numbers for the possible angle, which one's it going to be? And again, what helps you decide that is going to be knowing and understanding the type of the angle. Now the next type of measuring instrument that's usually popular with students to measure angles is a 360-degree angle measurer. Now again, this is just 360, and it's useful, helpful, particularly when you're dealing with pie charts or when you're a little bit concerned about measuring reflex angles, which I will show you how to do that comfortably on a protractor. Now again, the key points of a 360-degree angle measurer, well, the center is this point here. So that there is the center of the angle measurer, and we've got our baseline, which, if I'm doing the same color as I did before, is this line here. So again, the baseline is always a line that connects 0 with 180, and let me just make that a little bit more accurate. And there we go, and that there is my baseline. Let's label that as such. So hopefully with the protractor you've got in front of you, you can be able to match up which type of protractor you've got, and also identify the center of the protractor, the baseline, and also where 0 is. Now before we get on to actually measuring an angle with a protractor, let's just have a quick brief look at angle notation. Now when you're asked to measure an angle from a diagram, angle notation may be used. Now sometimes a question might say measure angle D, in which they're probably most likely looking at this angle here, and notice that more often than not they'll be looking for the angle inside the shape rather than outside, because obviously looking at that point D, you might think, oh, that's one angle D, but it could also mean this green angle here. But typically speaking, within a shape, that they tend to go for the angle that's inside the shape. So again, so a question could be as simple as measure angle D, and that what you can see highlighted on the screen would be angle D. Now another way of looking at angle notation is using one of two symbols. Now the first one is looking at this. So this is where we've got little hats, and we've got three letters with a hat or a sort of arrow on the middle letter. Now basically what that says is, if you look at the first point, which is A, so that's here, then you go to the second letter, which is B, and then the third letter, which is C. Now if you join those points up in that particular order, what they're asking for is the angle created by joining those lines. And obviously you'd think that those lines would be straight, in which they are, but basically the angle that's represented by angle ABC with a hat above the B is the angle here. Now a shorthand way of looking at it is basically it's the middle letter is the angle that you're asked to find. So that could be an option. So you don't feel as if you have to mark out what the first letter is, what the middle letter is, what the last letter is. It's basically the angle with a little hat on top. And another way of looking at angle notation is to represent it with a little diagram, angle diagram. So here we've got a little angle there that represents an angle. And again, it's the angle that's represented by the third letter connecting those three lines together. So starting at A, you go to B, and then you go to C. And it's angle created at those 3 points, and that would be here. But again, it's the middle letter that you're kind of looking for. So it's always important that from a diagram's perspective, you know from its notation of which angle it is you're actually looking for. And going again, although there may be two angles that you can see at that particular point, both either acute and reflex, or an obtuse and a reflex angle, it's more often than not going to be the angle inside the shape that they are looking for. So let's have a look at actual measuring some angles. So let's have a look at this first angle, which is angle ABC. So again, I can notate this particular angle as ABC with a little hat on the B, or I could represent this as with an angle and then ABC. So first things first, let's get our protractor. Now the general rules are that I'm going to put the center of the protractor at the corner of the angle that I'm actually measuring, and that's really, really important. And I'm also going to measure and place the 0 line on the angle on one of the lines that I'm actually basing it on. So my baseline is going to go on one of the lines of the angle. Now looking closely at this particular sort of angle, you can see that my line is just a little bit short to use the outside numbers. Now if that is the case, obviously I'm going to use what I'm going to do is I'm going to draw, and I can actually extend this line to make it easier if I need to. So let me just do just that, like so, and that should make it a little bit easy for me to get a more accurate reading of my protractor. Now looking at this particular angle, it's an angle that's going to be either 54 degrees or 126. There are my two options. I've got 54 degrees or 126 degrees. They're the two readings from either using the outside numbers or the inside numbers. Now from this I know that looking at this angle that it is an acute angle. So I know that from my two options that the correct answer is going to be 54 degrees. Then moving on to my next angle. Now this one's a little bit more controversial because it may look like at first glance that it's an acute angle, but actually it's an obtuse angle. So again, I'm going to put 0 on one of the lines. Now if I wanted to, I'm going to put 0 on the top line. And again, I'm going to put my center of my protractor at this point here. And again, 0 has to go on one of the lines of the angle, which it is. And again, the more accurate you are, the more accurate your reading is going to be. So from this, I can see that the line EF is either going to be give me an angle of either 110 degrees or 70 degrees. They're my two options. Now because this is an obtuse angle, I'm going to go for the obtuse answer, which is 110 degrees. Moving on to our next one, which is this one here, so the angle GHI. So again, I'm going to put my protractor, center of the protractor on the edge of the angle. I'm going to put 0 on one of the lines, so you can see I'm using 0 on the inside numbers. So that means I'm going to be using the inside numbers. So again, there's little things that you can use. Whatever side your 0 is on, they're the set of numbers you're going to be using. So here 0 on the inside is being used, so I'm going to use my inside numbers. So from this, I get two choices of my answer, and that's going to be either 66 degrees or it's going to be 114. Now again, because this is an acute angle, I'm going to use my acute answer, which is 66 degrees. And moving on to angle JKL. So again, I'm going to put my center of my protractor on the edge or the corner of my angle and match that up. 0 on the base, on the line I'm going to draw. Now again, my 0 is on the outside numbers, so I'm going to use my outside numbers to measure this angle, and that's at 92 degrees, which seems about right because this is just an obtuse angle. And there is my answer. And again, in terms of notation, I can write this as JKL with a little hat on top, or I could write it as with my angle, but the letters need to go in order. Now, does it matter in terms of getting the J and the L the right way around? Well, no, it doesn't, but generally speaking, you tend to go alphabetical order, but the middle angle needs to be the angle of where the actual measured angle is actually going to be. Now, when it comes to a reflex angle, and so here for the next one, so for angle MNO, it is a reflex angle. Now, there are two ways in which I could work this out. Now, the problem is I've only got a 180 degree angle measurer. And obviously this reflex angle is going to be an answer that is bigger than 180. So how do I go about doing it? Well, there's two ways in which you can do this. One way is to turn one of the points into a straight line. So here I've split this angle into two parts. I know that this angle here is 180 because it's a straight line. And now if I then measure what this angle here is, which if I just highlight in red, and again that's going to be an obtuse angle, or an obtuse angle I should say. And again I'm going to put 0 on the line, my center protractor on the edge, and although the angle isn't really extending, which I'm going to do is I'm just going to extend that line a little easier, like so, and that works out to be, while using 0 on the inside numbers, I'm going to use the inside numbers, that works out to be 115 degrees. So my angle of MNO is going to be equal to 180 degrees plus 115 degrees, which adds up to be 295 degrees as my final answer. Now, alternative to doing that is to actually measure the angle that I don't want. So that's one way of doing it. So let me show you with the next example of angle PQR, and that is a reflex angle. Now from this, what I could do is I could use the similar method I used for the previous question. So I could join one of the lines and make it into two angles. So split this reflex in. That's going to be 180, and then all I need to do is measure what this angle here is, and I can then work that out. An alternative would be to actually measure the angle that I don't want, which in this case is 135. So this angle here is 135 degrees. Now, because I know that angles around a circle add up to 180, then all I then need to do is to work out what this angle that I need to work out is going to be. It's going to be 360. Take away the angle that I don't want, which is 135 degrees, and that will give me an answer of 225 degrees. And there is my final answer. And I would get the same answer as if I added 180 degrees to whatever that angle is going to be. So with reflex angles, there are two ways of doing it. You just got to decide which way is best for you. Personally speaking, I would measure the angle that you don't want and take it away from 360, as it's going to be a lot easier and a lot accurate, and also a little bit quicker because you're not having to take it away from, let's say, add numbers up together, even though you are taking it away. But also, you're not having to draw a straight line, which can be a little bit fiddly depending on the page. Now, if you have got an angle that's particularly small, again, I strongly encourage you to extend the lines with a ruler or straight edge for it to make it easier for you to read the numbers off a protractor. So try not to go for protractors, particularly if you've got a protractor where you haven't got lines that go from the center to each of the numbers. So for example, some protractors don't have these lines that connect it, and if that is the case, then I strongly advise you extending your lines so you can actually go, so it goes through some of the actual degree lines on the edge of your protractor. Now we'll put some practice questions in the description below for you to test your ability to measure angles with the protractor that you have got.